Moment for Narendra Taneja, India's leading energy expert. We started this morning early out of Beijing and Shanghai and China and Australia and across Asia, Singapore and Indonesia, and now we're moving into South Asia. We kick off the South Asia segment, which will have a 15-minute conversation with Narendra and then a 30-minute discussion, panel discussion. Narendra, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on this Global Energy Outlook. Let's kick off with the easy question, or the big question, but how will geopolitical factors such as the new Trump administration and more enforceful sanctions on Iran influence India's oil import strategy in 2025? A year we're coming away from 2024. Obviously, Russia featured heavily in India's oil import strategies, lots of availability of their discounted oil. What does the outlook for 2025 look like when you think about India's oil imports intersecting with the new global geopolitical reality? Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me, and Happy New Year to you and to all your viewers around the world.
Thank you.
Interesting question. When we look at from the India's viewpoint, there are broadly speaking four main areas that India is focusing on. Number is one, of course, Trump 2.0, very important. Or should we say Trump, Elon Musk 2.0? We don't know how to look at it. And if you go by the flow of tweets these days, from Elon Musk. Second is, of course, the Middle East. And actually exactly in this order. What happens in the Middle East in terms of Iran, in terms of, negotiation with Hamas, and the kind of equation that country like India would like to see, in the region in terms of Israel, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Iran, and Turkey and Syria, and Russia and Syria, and so on and so forth. Third is Ukraine, because it's very important that we would like to see in 2025 some kind of breakthrough, hopefully within the first 6 months of Trump. And if something happens there in terms of a, kind of a ceasefire, or at least a freeze, that of course would be a very good news for India. Fourth is China. How China goes in terms of, the economic slowdown, and also its geopolitical ambition vis-a-vis, particularly the United States and Taiwan. So these are four areas, broadly speaking, very important. But in terms of when we are looking around, it looks like, that India will continue to import more oil from Russia. It, of course, depends on the price. But what we have seen, for instance, India's private refiner Reliance entering into a almost like $25 to $30 billion deal to import oil from Rosneft. So that means that they are already talking of a very long-term, roadmap. And maybe other Indian refiners, including state-owned refiners, might go the same way. Which means that, economics is doing fine. And the logistics in terms of, shipping that oil from whether the western part of Russia or the eastern part of Russia, that somehow is going to work. That's how it looks like. But if there is a breakthrough on Ukraine and some kind of softening of, sanctions, that will be, of course, a great news. That means that Russia would probably be offering even more discount, and they would probably be importing even more oil from Russia. Number two is, of course, moving to the Middle East. India is keeping very close eyes on what's happening in Iran in particular, and also what's happening in Syria, because Syria has become now a kind of geopolitical junction in the Middle East. What happens, how things are going to unfold in Syria is going to paint the picture as far as India is concerned, what happens in terms of Iran.
When you look at Turkey, that sort of watching posture, what about playing an influential part? India seems to sit on the sidelines, or maybe you're quietly in the back rooms, we don't see it, but these are major events happening in your neck of the woods. You're South Asia, we're West Asia, and yet India doesn't seem to advance with a geopolitical posture here to help solve some of these challenges.
Well, that's a very interesting question. We are a large economy. On PPP today, we are roughly a $12 trillion economy, and a very influential member of BRICS, a number of other intergovernmental and other bodies. But that said, at the same time, our experience is that probably we don't want to get involved in playing, brokering peace, or bringing parties together, what China has started doing. And we think that we probably want to focus more on what's in our national interest. If you look at the geopolitics, the way it's unfolding, you have got, for instance, the West on the one side, and then China, which has got similar ambition as the West. And I look upon China like the new West. China is the new West. The way they started looking at things with the same ambition, geopolitical ambition to rule the world, to establish a world order which is more China's, center and so on and so forth. So India sees that there is an opportunity when China is busy with what they want to do, and the United States trying to stop them, and West trying to do what West wants to do, and Russia, China, all others trying to stop them. So we find that there is a space in between for India to build its own universe. So instead of basically trying to broker peace or to be on this side and this side, we have to create our own space. And we think we are today economically strong enough to start building our own space, which probably will fructify, let's say, be there for everybody to see in about 20 years from now. So we want to keep quiet. We facilitate, like in Ukraine, we are facilitating, let's say, in Afghanistan with Taliban. Only yesterday in Dubai, our foreign secretary met with the Taliban's, defense minister. So behind the scene, things are happening. As we talk today, there is an Indian delegation in Tehran. And India is also active in Syria. So, and at the same time in Moscow and Ukraine. So, but we don't want to do it in a manner which, for instance, raise unnecessary expectation, because when it comes to our bandwidth, diplomatic bandwidth, the global, goodwill bandwidth, we want to use it to build our own universe, to build our own space, while the West is busy with the West, East is busy with what they are. So we think that here is an opportunity, for a lifetime opportunity for India to focus on its own national interest, to create its own sphere, and to build its own.
Well, when you think about that, let's say the Iran point, you said you have people in Iran. Would you be supportive of a tighter sanction policy on Iran? The last Trump administration did that. The next one is indicating that it will do the same. That caused a lot of turbulence in the region, a very critical region for India, a very critical source of oil supply for India, containing Iran again. Is that a policy that India would support?
Well, you see, India is a civilizational brother. We have known Iran for centuries. And, so it's a very special country for us. We know them very well. They know us very well. And let's not forget even the day-to-day language that we speak in places like Delhi. We use 2 to 3% words which are actually Persian by origin. So we have such close relationship with Iran. But at the same time, so we will not be supporting any tightening, of sanctions and so on and so forth. We would like to see some kind of breakthrough. We would like Iran to be mainstream. We would like to be able to import oil from Iran. In fact, we did some parcels just in the last 6 months as an experiment, not directly, but through a spot market. So we would like to see kind of Iran joining the mainstream. But that said, at the same time, we know it very well that Iran at times can be a very difficult customer to deal with, can be a very difficult customer to negotiate with. And we also do not agree with some of their ambitions. For instance, what they try to do in Lebanon or what they try to do in Gaza and all that. We think Iran would be probably doing better if Iran focus more on rebuilding its economy and of course, be an important player given its size, history, and everything. And in India, many of us, including me, we are very worried about what China is doing Iran. It's kind of colonization of Iran that's probably in the process, in Iran when it comes to China. So India is among those countries which are very unhappy with what's going on in Iran. So we would like Iran to build better bridges with the West, with particularly countries like France and Germany, and of course with Russia, but also with Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Turkey and all others. So India is in India's interest to a stable, prosperous, and peaceful Middle East. So that's India's top priority area, and Iran is a very, very important player in the whole thing. And behind the scene, India is always trying to play a role that it can.
I mean, we see India's role, India's activity, and at the same token, we see a very close relationship between the personal relationship of the Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, and Donald Trump, the next president of the United States. Is that likely to influence the strategy, maybe import more oil from the US? Like you said previously, that one of the reasons India was looking at giving Russia a greater outlet for other oil than just being dependent on China. India was seeing to keep Russia from going deep into the China orbit. Will you look to the US, with a strategic viewpoint that maybe take more oil from US because that's very important to Mr. Trump?
Well, to be honest, many in India are happy to see President Trump moving into the White House. India thinks that it's easy to deal with him. People call him transactional, but we think that, that he's a person that's easy to negotiate with, and we can basically kind of go for the whole review of the whole thing. So in India, there is an excitement and enthusiasm, and they're looking forward to, January 20th.
Was that proved to be the case the last time? Did he deliver as expected, that hence the enthusiasm this time?
Well, there were no expectations last time when he moved into the White House, but it turned out that he was a good president for India. India found it, our experience was good in dealing with him, and we achieved a lot when he was there. So in terms of so there is kind of enthusiasm, but at the same time, everybody knows he's transactional. Everybody knows that, he's going to ask for his pound of flesh. We know that. But at the same time,
and what does that look like for India? What do you think the pound of flesh you'll have to give him?
Higher tariffs on Indian software exports. So that, and maybe even products, like we import a lot of petrol and diesel and the products to the United States. So we are waiting for that. But the good news is that, Biden did a good job, but we thought that, Biden has become a cheerleader of renewable energy, which was not serving our global interest, because India is an oil economy. We're heavily dependent on fossil fuels. We are pushing for renewables better and faster than most developed countries. But that said, at the same time, we need more oil, we need more gas. So Biden kind of being the cheerleader and saying, all right, demonizing oil, that was bad for us. So now when Trump comes in and says, drill, baby, drill, it sounds like a Bollywood song, sweet song to our ears.
Would there be a lot of this sort of dancing that would go with that? There would be a Bollywood shake your booty. Let's go to the survey question.
In a way, yes. In a way, in the sense that means more money going into exploration production worldwide, and that's good for us because we are so heavily dependent on import. Roughly 88% of our requirement is coming from imports. So that way it's good. But the important when it comes to would we be importing more oil from the United States? It all depends on the economics. If Russia continue to offer better economics, then I think it will continue to be Russia number one. But if the American exporters can offer even a better deal, you will also be importing more from them. So it's all about economics. It's not, but the second point, which is very important at the same time, India is very worried about, growing dependence of Russia on China. So we would like basically to be even a closer friend with Russia, simply because we would like to see Russia asserting its strategic autonomy. Russia is a great country, is a great power when it comes, especially energy, the energy that India needs.
So does that translate to mean that you would be generally pleased to see a weaker China that would keep them a little contained and oil prices a little bit lower?
Oh, well, you see, a weaker China is not a bad news for us, because China is creating problem for us everywhere, up in the mountains in the Himalayas, through Pakistan, through, Middle East, through Southeast Asia, Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Bangladesh, everywhere. So of course, if China gets more busy handling its economy and handling its South China Sea and so forth, that's good for us. In fact, it's important to mention here, the last 6 months, we have seen China changing a little bit. China is reaching out to India in a way, trying to softening, whatever tension we have, especially when it comes to the border. So we are beginning to see a little bit of new China the last 6 months. We don't know. China is an extremely difficult country to read and to interpret. We don't know. China can say left, we are turning left, and they may turn right. So we don't know. But what we have seen the last 6
know them
months,
for 10,000 years. Let's just finish up putting you on the spot for your outlook for oil prices, where you think the sort of big picture oil demand supply balance goes in this year.
Well, my own sense is that it will depend, of course, whether Trump is going to walk the talk in terms of, drill, baby, drill, number one. Number two, what happens to the private climate deal. And more importantly, what happens on Ukraine. It all depends on all that. If things go as he has promised, we see some breakthrough over Ukraine, and we see kind of, some policy initiatives for drill, baby, drill, then I think my own sense is we're going to see oil price in the region of $70 to $72 per barrel, let's say the first 6 months. On the average, price may go up to $80 per barrel and come down to 865. But I think if we go by 70 to 72, $73 per barrel Brent, I think probably that will be safer. That's my own sense. But as I said, if Trump walks the talk, that's the most important thing.
What is your do you expect OPEC Plus to keep the current cuts through the end of the year?
I think OPEC is going to struggle. And OPEC is an experienced organization, but they're going to struggle in the sense that, dealing with Trump 2.0, with his kind of agenda, many countries are going to struggle. We have already seen Greenland, we have seen Denmark, we have seen Canada, and I think OPEC is going to be more or less in the same basket, struggle.
Well, we're going to wrap it up there with OPEC Plus struggle and the answers in this survey question. What's at stake for India's energy security in 25? 1, mitigating geopolitics, splitting the vote with capitalizing on lower oil prices. Narendra Taneja, India's leading energy expert and a regular commentator on the Daily Energy Markets podcast. You have to add that to one of your job titles. Thank you so much, Narendra. Really great to have your insights. We're going to ask you to turn off your camera and now invite the panel on to give us a wider South Asia perspective, including India, but also beyond India. So Narendra, thank you, and invite the others to bring on their cameras. Osama Rizvi, Energy and Economic Analyst for Primary Vision in Pakistan. Vibhuti Garg, Director of South Asia at IEEFA. And Ram Narayanan, Leading Energy Analyst for India. Not you're going to be competing there with Narendra for that job title. I think there's the leading and the best and the top and the greatest. That's a sort of a Dubai thing. We love all those biggest and greatest. But let's kick off this morning's session and the last session for Asia. We've been now in our 3 hours traversing from the Far East to west towards the Middle East, which is the next section. But I wanted to kick off with Vibhuti and get your views on how you see South Asia, India, sort of balancing its economic growth with the need to sustainably meet its rising energy demand, particularly in the face of climate challenges. This seems to be the sort of big question facing this year in Asia, to balance these two things. Or will you follow Europe and America, who said, forget about energy transition, we're going energy security? Your thoughts on how that balance faces South Asia in this new year?
Right. Thanks, Sean, for inviting me, and a happy new year to everyone. Regarding your question on South Asia, I think Narendra has set the tone really well. But in my view, I think South Asia region is in a really bright spot in today's global economy. The region has been growing much, much faster than other developed as well as developing economies. If you see the rate of economic growth, the GDP growth rate in India, we have been witnessing around 7%, and while there is some correction, and hope this year we may not be witnessing around 7%, maybe 6.5%, but still it's a very positive and growth rate that we are witnessing. But that also means that, this growth might come with some environmental impact, which we are all aware that, the region has one of the most polluted cities. 9 out of the 10 world most polluted cities are in South Asia. So how do we address the issue of, economic growth with the rising issue of environmental impact as well? So I think...
Are those two things becoming part of the public narrative?
They are, because especially, this issue of, local air pollution was only maybe 5 years back, maybe concentrated in the northern part of India, say, for example. But now I think it is becoming an issue not only in north, but also in west, down south. So almost all the cities with, rising population, with rising pressure on the infrastructure are, facing the issue. And that involves not only, having the right set of technologies to replace, say, for example, renewable energy, not only in the electricity sector, but mobility, industries, they all are contributing to this rising emission issue. While their share is less right now, but they are becoming increasingly drivers of, emissions, both local as well as global emission.
Although you heard Narendra Taneja there say, give me more oil, give me more fossil fuels. I want as much as you can sell me. Let's go to Pakistan, Osama Rizvi, and get your thoughts. I mean, just picking up there on Vibhuti's comment, India, rah, 7%. Doesn't seem to be much coattails on India's growth, like we've seen in Southeast Asia, China, and many of its neighbors all growing together. Your outlook for Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and the neighborhood that makes up South Asia, the year ahead, that their challenges.
Well, thank you, Sean, for inviting me today. Happy New Year to all. I believe that they are both bullish and bearish factors when we look at 2025. This is true for both the oil markets and the global markets otherwise as well. Speaking about Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and the neighborhood, if you look at the World Bank or ADB's recent projections, they sort of put rather positive light and see a GDP growth of about 6% on average, something like that. However, most of these reports and the rosy outlooks tend to avoid or not include one of the most important things, which is the debt crisis. Recently there has been an incredible amount of debt, public debt that has been added, and specifically in the developing countries. I can tell about Pakistan.
We had the spectacular Sri Lanka default over the last 24 months.
Absolutely, and also Pakistan
came right up to the door.
Just averted it. We recently got the 25th IMF bailout package. About
that could be a record. You could be the most as well, the biggest, the mostest, or Egypt might be competing with you for that.
That is a record, Sean, that I really hope that we don't.
Yeah, not one that one wants.
And 54% of the country's budget goes into the countries in South Asia as well. So I believe this global debt crisis is something that is being overlooked, and that might play a part and also pull down.
Osama, I'm having problems with your feed. I'm not sure if that's shared with everybody else, but perhaps maybe turn off your camera. You give you a bit more bandwidth as we come back to you, just to try that. Ram, I wanted you to pick up on this commentary here that the outlook for demand growth, also, energy demand growth in the region.
I think there's a crosstalk, Sean.
Yeah, Osama, you might just mute there if you would. Ram, since the elections in India last year, it does feel like a little bit of Narendra Modi's mojo has been depleted, with is a little bit diluted. Your thoughts on that, and also the idea of demand growth in South Asia. India is nowhere near what China became, but can it continue? Can it sort of move in that direction? Speak to demand growth and the mojo of Narendra Modi could lead that in South Asia.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me here. Wish you all a very happy new year. Let me take it one by one. The mojo of Narendra Modi.
Yeah.
The first part is regarding the election results, which was not up to the expectation of Mr. Narendra Modi. But if you look at the recent state elections, especially in the state where I live, Maharashtra, they had a thumping victory also. So as far as the mojo of Narendra Modi is concerned, that's a part and parcel of the Indian political story. It goes up and down, but it looks to be that the central government is very firmly in place right now. So that's what as far as mojo goes. As far as the economy going a little bit slow in the third quarter, yes, mainly because in the last 2 years, the Indian economy was being driven by the capital expenditure of the central government, which sort of slowed down during the election time and after the new government took over, which has had its effect on the GDP growth rate going down to around 5.4% in the last quarter. But looking ahead, I think it looks to be pretty firm right now. So therefore, that's as far as the political things and the outlook on the Indian economy as far as it goes. So therefore, as Vibhuti said, India is still on a strong growth path, 6.5 to 7%, as I would put it. And that looks pretty firm right now. Now, as far as demand growth, I think you are especially referring to oil demand growth. India's, and I think specific reference to whether India can compare with China. In terms of share volumes, China 16.5 billion barrels per day, India's 5.1 billion barrels per day. So the sizes are different. But the Indian economy is growing at around 6.5 to 7%. So therefore, the oil demand
and
growth
that's
rate
my point and question, really, because we don't seem to see a sort of commensurate growth in oil imports and consumption with the growth in the GDP growth. And that's where you might see all of the other energy supplies featuring. But 6.5, 7% growth, you would expect more oil.
Well, one of the ways you have to look into is India's energy mix. It's still predominantly coal right now. And then after that comes oil and gas and all. And second thing is India's gas imports is also increasing. There's a lot of focus on gas usage in India. So if we put all this together, maybe the numbers might not work out given the GDP growth rate. But look at it this way. India's gasoline consumption is strong. The diesel consumption is strong because of the growth rate. The aviation fuel consumption is strong. And Indian refiners also, they've been importing huge amounts of oil, especially from Russia. And India is an export hub for many of these petroleum products, even to Europe also, the market which has been displaced from Russia. So put all this together, the demand growth rate is still pretty firm, maybe not adding up to the numbers as what you saw in China about some 10 years back. So therefore, the outlook for India would be demand growth is going to be firm, maybe 3.5%, as I would put it, as far as oil demand growth rate is concerned. And the economy is also on a firm growth path. Now, if I can increase my scope towards Southeast Asia, let's look at all the countries, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, and all. Look at all the GDP growth. It is beyond 5.5%. And most of these countries are predominantly depending upon fossil fuel. And even though they're all taking different steps, including India, to move towards renewables, but still fossil fuels is going to be the main driver for the economic growth. So therefore, from the way I look at it is the demand growth for all in Southeast Asia is going to be firm. And everybody's looking towards tying up the energy security. And so therefore, the previous question was whether it's energy security or move towards renewables. I would put it this way, given the fact that more than 2 billion of the world population resides in these countries, I think energy security first and then comes towards a move transition towards renewables. That's the way I would put it.
Vibhuti, just looking at the outlook vis-a-vis the potential trade wars that are going to emerge this year with the threats from the new Trump administration, even their greatest friends and neighbors, Canada, Mexico, or Europe, are not exempt from this. So you'd imagine India must also be on the impact, as well as South Asia. Your thoughts on how that could play out from the point of view of Asia trade? Will it impact the import of US energy, LNG, oil, etc.? Your thoughts on that tariff trade war and its impact for Asia growth and Asia energy imports?
I would first like to comment on, your question, which you were talking with Ram on, we are not seeing the same rate of growth in oil consumption the way we are seeing in the GDP growth rate. So on to that point, I think there is some level of fuel switching definitely happening. So there is energy transition happening in India. Oil is being replaced, say, for example, by electric vehicles. We are seeing increasing growth rate of deployment of electric vehicles. Similarly, there's a lot of solar rooftop being developed, which is to an extent replacing diesel. So there is some level of replacement happening, and that's why you're not seeing the exact same level of growth in fossil fuels versus, the way the GDP growth rate is, because there is definitely a new demand, incremental demand. So India is going to take few years to replace all with the clean energy. But yeah, a lot of new clean energy deployment is the way the India is also looking at. And now in terms of your question on, the trade restrictions, how it's going to impact, definitely this is having an impact on the cost of energy. We have seen the recent tenders, the prices that we are now seeing in terms of, increasing costs And that's leading to increased cost of, energy for the consumers. And that is not something which India is really happy about. So with all these trade
And it's only
barriers,
beginning, right? I mean, you have inflation, trade restrictions, GDP. It's hard to see how India could hit 7% again this year.
and then your currency is depreciating. So that is also having an impact on, the real value of energy, the cost of energy here. So this is just the beginning, but all these trade wars, I think,
Could we
is
see a year ahead where India's energy imports actually decline?
that's the objective. We are looking at, increasing, say, for example, while there's nothing to be proud about, that increasing domestic coal production to replace imported coal, that's something which the government has been pushing in terms of increasing more and more mining of coal. But oil is something which India does not have. So it has to necessarily import. Coal is the only fuel, where it can think of increasing domestic mining. So I think there's not one-on-one replacement. So while to improve the trade deficit and the current account deficit, there is an emphasis to replace imports with domestic, sources of energy. And that's why there is a big push for renewable energy, because it's available domestically. But at the same time, the supply chains are not available domestically. So you are replacing one import with the other. So that's always going to be the case. And no country on its own, can have all the resources available domestically. So at some point of value chain, we will still be dependent on imports. But the shape and form can change.
Osama, I wanted to get your thoughts on the outlook for Pakistan and again across South Asia. One of the big challenges on the energy side has always been the access to capital to build permanent infrastructure to, well, it'll be LNG import facilities, pipelines, ports, etc. Where do you think that goes in the new year in order to relieve some of the bottlenecks that these countries have with regards to energy imports?
Well, Sean, that is a really good question. And the answer to this relates to actually the bigger picture issue that whether Pakistan's economy will grow in 2025 and beyond, right? And what are the projections for that? So some believe that it might see a growth of about 3.5%. I personally believe we might see a contraction around 0.6 to 0.7%. And at best, there might be a 1% GDP growth. Keeping that train of thought, we talk about LNG. Currently, Pakistan sort of is delaying purchasing some LNG tankers from Qatar. There has been a very interesting shift that we are seeing on the grounds here, which is a shift towards the LPG. It offers more modularity. It offers stackability. And moving forward, and I was discussing this with a very dear friend who is visiting from the US. He was here. We were here in the old town all day, and he was surprised to see all of these LPG cylinders. And it's sort of, you could see a decentralization of the grid happening here in Pakistan, and I'm sure some version of it is also happening in India as well. So I believe that instead of building these big infrastructures for LNG and natural gas and refineries, I believe there is a shift happening on this end where the consumer is being powered. We're also seeing a good growth, a decent amount of growth when it comes to renewables. Solar projects, they have added around 10 gigawatt of power this year, expected to reach 20 gigawatt. 12 solar power projects are under assessment. 174 megawatt of wind power projects are under assessment at the moment. We have recently signed, with UK-based Oracle, the construction of the first green hydrogen plant in Sindh as well. So there is a bit of fear of innovation and sort of a problem solving going on, where the where the private sector has jumped in. And I believe this would be the playground where most of the developments will happen. In terms of our countries, sorry.
I was just going to bring in Ram to get a sort of wider view here politically, Ram, on just sort of building on the back of Osama's comments. Southeast Asia seems to have achieved one significant, I mean, many things, but ultimately the one significant gateway to growth has been political stability and the ability for the ASEAN countries to come together and create a kind of a European Union for the sake of a reference of sorts. Whereas South Asia seems to be still fractured in all sorts of political problems. Is there any outlook for that? Is there any hope to see Sri Lanka getting its act together? That India, even Narendra Modi, getting a little bit of his wings clipped in order to bring the whole of the Indian democracy ship forward together? Your just thoughts on the South Asian geopolitical, geostrategic alignment in order to open up the gateway for growth, regional.
Well, many years back, there was a regional trade agreement called SARC, which didn't actually succeed as much as one would have thought. But given the latest scenario, there has been if you look at India, many of India's neighbors, there have been some political instability. There have been some issues in countries like Bangladesh and some issues in Sri Lanka also. But at the same time, India is also getting its act a little bit together, like especially with Sri Lanka and with Maldives. And similarly, to other countries also. But still, if you look from economic economic cooperation together, I still believe it's still some time away. We are still far away, mainly because of the differences politically and a lot of inter-regional issues that's been going on for quite some time. So it needs a lot of political will from all the sides to create a big economic forum like what you have in ASEAN or in EU. So if you ask my view, yes, it's a great initiative. It should work. It should work if you look from a theory perspective, but still from a political perspective, still we're a little bit far away. And the biggest economy here is India. So I think India has been taking quite a lot of steps to do that, but still political, it will still take quite a bit of time before we can have a free-flowing this thing like what you have in EU or ASEAN.
Yeah. Let's go to the survey question and then put our commentators on the spot for the last round on what they see with oil prices and supply demand fundamentals in the year ahead. But first, the survey question: what will drive South Asia's economic progress in 25? 1, mitigating risks from extreme weather, social unrest, and policy delays. 2, unlocking growth potential through greater global trade and investment openness. There's a lot of criticism over the years that South Asia not only has the political fractures, but also remains a fairly protectionist economic bloc, or not a bloc, but economic national interests. 3, boosting economic output by increasing female labor force participation. We've seen that in other emerging economies. We're seeing that happen a lot in Saudi Arabia now and having very positive impact. Is that a tap that can unleash the South Asia gold genie that can really bring not only India forward, but all of the countries? So what will drive South Asia's economic progress in 25? Obviously, it's 1 year, it's an outlook. Your thoughts on that? Mitigating the risk from extreme weather seems to be a big challenge, as was mentioned earlier, in the cities of India, amongst the most polluted in the world. Vibhuti, I want to put all of you on the spot in our last 5 minutes together about where you think the big picture on oil prices are going in the year ahead, supply-demand balance, OPEC strategy. Your thoughts on those big macro picture?
I think the way we have seen in the recent weeks that the prices have started rising again. And we do hope that trajectory softens and we are able to reduce the geopolitical risk by either doing long-term contracts, because I think the way India has been recently securing more energy supplies through short-term contracts. I think one of the big reasons was they don't want to lock in investments where prices are so volatile. So I think price volatility is driving India to enter into short-term contracts, but it could also come at a risk because we are now seeing prices going up again. So I think while all the geopolitical risk could lead to more supply shocks as well as more price shocks, India needs to insulate itself from these price shocks through a long-term strategy as well.
And again, your price forecast for Brent crude oil for the year ahead?
I wish
lower, higher?
Number.
Last year was $80 average. You're hoping it's lower, obviously. But that's where that's at. Osama, Rizvi, your thoughts on the bigger picture issues for the sort of macro supply demand balances and oil prices for the year ahead? Osama, you're on mute, sorry.
Well, Sean, I remain bearish when it comes to oil prices in 2025 as well. That is because not only that there will be some bullish factors, such as the ongoing geopolitical conflicts, which might cause wild swings in the markets, but fundamentally, if you look at the demand side, from 840,000 barrels per day to 1.1 million barrels per day versus the surplus projections of 950,000 to 1.4 million barrels per day. Also, we are seeing players like Norway, Guyana, the non-OPEC supply is expected to reach around 1.8 million, increase by 1.8 million barrels per day. Chinese demand story will remain the key concern for the oil prices. We are seeing some positivity, but still, I believe China will have to put out more stimulus for the economy to work. There will be, on average, I believe, and we at Primary Vision believe Brent would average around 72, with more downside all the way to 65 rather than the upside.
Ray, last word to you, and you might bring in the Trump factor, how that could impact the big macro picture. Of course, he's very, very determined to see U.S. oil and gas production drill, Bailey, drill, grow, grow, grow. Will ExxonMobil say no?
Sorry, that's for me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that. Yeah, no, I think adding on to what others have said, I think Trump is saying drill, baby, drill. And I expect the supply to be very, very firm. So given the fact that there'll be more supplies from non-OPEC also. And from the demand side, Chinese demand, practically, we have heard some speakers in the morning also. So I think expect to be lukewarm. So therefore, I expect the supply demand to be in the surplus, so maybe close to about 500,000 barrels per day. So given all these factors put together, unless until there is a major supply chain shock that happens, I expect the market to be bearish. So my view is somewhere between 68 or 170, 71 Brent crude oil. That's what my numbers are.
Is there anything about, here's the survey result, that what will drive South Asia economic progress in 25, unlocking growth potential through greater global trade and investment openness? Of course, they mightn't have any choice in that if Trump follows through with his trade war, trade tariffs. Your thoughts on that particular impact on South Asia, on India? Is there a particular trade tariff, a particular Trump move that South Asia, India is particularly concerned about? Is there any retaliatory tool in the toolbox?
Well, a lot of the things have been talked in the last month and a half, including some tariffs. Trump is asking for removal of some tariffs from American products into India. And there is expecting some retaliatory tariffs. But we have to see how much actually Trump is going to walk the talk. And I'm sure, given the fact that India and US are actually very strategic partners, their solution will be found out. But yes, what I expect is initially, in the initial days of the Trump administration, a lot of announcements will be made. It will lead to some volatility in the market. So that's it. So then the world has to brace itself for a lot of volatility. And coming specifically to India, yes, there will be some effect in the market. And in fact, the last month and a half, the government of India has engaged with all the different industries as to how to mitigate the effect of any of the tariffs, if at all it is put out there. So net to expect a bit of volatility, but soon the solution will be found. Yes, there is a bit of concern about the tariffs, but given the fact that India and USA share a very strategic partnership, people are not overly concerned about any negative effects of the Trump administration.
Well, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Not overly concerned about the Trump. There seems that people are dancing in the streets in India with the return of Trump. And that makes it, I suppose, a bit like Oklahoma. You got something in common with Oklahoma, so you're in good company there. No, we'll see, right? The unknown, but the unknown is being outlined. we'll see if the Himalayan mountains need to be called Trump Towers or something. But thank you so much for your comments and participation today. That brings an end to the Asian section of the Global Energy Outlook Forum. We will have a 15-minute coffee break before a feature interview with the senior executive at the Kuwait Petroleum Corporation, giving us an insight as to Kuwait's views on the outlook for energy markets and the launch of their first energy trading firm. I think the general tone out of Asia has been bearish, but not going off a cliff. China is a plateau rather than a peak, in the sense that it's not going over some edge and down another side. Although there are some signals at the moment that they're going to have some very challenging times with their outlook for deflation. India will continue to be positive. The big question mark on Trump and what that means for Asia. Is there any? There'll be some Trump punches. Will there be any punching back? That will be interesting to observe. But somewhat Asian demand still critical to the oil market, still critical to OPEC Plus. And the outlook for them ending their cuts, bringing back their supply, and all in all, I would say on our 3 hours in Asia, it doesn't sound to me like OPEC Plus are going to be able to bring back their oil supply, oil cuts anytime soon, at least not based on Asian demand. Maybe somebody else will be hungry for those barrels. Vibhuti, Garg, thank you so much for joining us. Narayanan, thank you so much for joining us. And Osama Rizvi, really appreciate it, and look forward to your voice on the Daily Energy Markets podcast through the year. We'll take a 15-minute coffee break and come back with the senior trading executive at Kuwait Petroleum Corporation and kick off the Middle East.